Welcome everybody to the F4 Hunger Awareness Show.
It's my goal to feed 1 billion people before I die.
We want to bring awareness around the issue of hunger and food insecurity.
7 to 8 million people served so far. With the sole goal of eradicating world hunger by connecting sources of food to recipients in need. Fiorenza's Food for Friends.
Derek Fiorenza here on the F4 Hunger Awareness Show with my good friend Joseph Giandonato. Joe, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hello, how's it going, Derek? Doing fine. Just
Good.
can't wait till winter's over.
There you go. I'm really excited. I know we have some exciting stuff to get into. You put together an article recently and you visited a agency with Brenda.
Yes, that's correct.
So I wanted to kind of go through the experience. What was it like visiting an agency that we work with? And tell us a little bit about that experience. I'll bring it up on the screen.
I think it was interesting. It was also rewarding. And we had some exploratory discussions on how we can establish a synergistic relationship. Being one being F4, and then also two, how we can support this one organization that does some really admirable and also impactful work within our community, especially with individuals with some adaptive needs and also some developmental disabilities. What's interesting about this one organization that we had visited earlier this week is that they grow and cultivate a lot of their own food. They have they fully sustainable and contained farm. So it's really interesting. Now they did indicate that they do produce or yield some overages, and they're looking for ways to potentially help others in the community that were struggling with food insecurity, and how we could help maybe connect the dots for them.
So tell me a little bit about the food. They were actually growing food on site.
Yes, growing food on site. That they had a number of different gardens. They were doing a little bit of prep work for them. They also have a large planting day, which is a really large event for them, and they invite folks from the neighboring community. They invite residents and their families and employees and their families to participate. So that's something that we could potentially involve ourselves in in the coming weeks to maybe the next month or so.
Were you impressed with the work they're doing?
Absolutely. They're doing some meaningful work. They have over 150 residents, that are, at their location. They have a lot of acreage. A lot is, dedicated to, farming, other, sustainable resources. They have a lot of activities, for the residents. So it's definitely an organization that I would recommend, checking out, donating to, because they do some great work.
And you said they have 150 residents. Do they have people that actually stay over at that agency, or do they just come and get support during the day?
I believe a large majority of their residents are there overnight.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's really cool.
Yes.
Have you
Um,
been
and
to it? Go ahead.
and they maintain a full-time staff that supports them, that's helping them with activities of daily living, medical services, the receipt of social services. So it is a really comprehensive effort. And Brendan and I were blown away by the passion, and the commitment of all of the employees that were supporting these residents, and many of whom have lived there for decades. And they require assistance, and it's great because it's able to provide them a meaningful life, and giving them some purpose.
And this was the Camp Hill Village, Kimberton Hills.
That's correct, yes.
And we're pulling up their website so people can take a look at some of the work that they're doing. Um, It looks like they have a couple of different programs, ways to volunteer, ways to donate. Some statistics here. They have people from over 45 countries involved.
Hmm.
They've had over 18,600 days of continuous life sharing, and they have more than 190 workshop sessions per week. Wow.
Yep.
That's pretty staggering.
Yeah, and they also, have a cafe that's open 2 days a week. I might be wrong when I, attempt to recall the hours, but they are open on Wednesdays and Thursdays. For a few hours. It's a full service cafe, and folks in the community are invited to patronize the cafe, and they can pay as they wish.
That's amazing. Well, it sounds like that was a really great experience for you. Have you been
Yes.
to a agency before?
Nothing like that. No.
Okay, and this
Um,
is this is the bakery, I guess, that you referenced. So they're doing the bakery. Wow,
yes.
that's pretty amazing. So that was a good experience then for you to kind of be involved in that and to learn about work they're doing in the community.
Most certainly, and I envision, potentially establishing a partnership with them, moving forward.
That's amazing. Yep, open Wednesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 2. That's great.
Yep.
Well, and we're doing some work with them, it sounds like already. We're providing them access to food occasionally.
Yes, if necessary, yes.
Amazing. That's really great. Well, and they have got distribution, it looks like, with their bakery and some of the local Kimberton Whole Food. That's really beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful that they're
Yep. Yep.
yeah, they're really spread out nicely. Well, good. Well, I'm glad you had a chance to do that and you had that experience. I know you were busy.
Hmm.
Obviously, you're in teaching season and doing your training and workouts, but tell us a little
Hmm.
bit about the newsletter that you just wrote.
So really, the newsletter that I had, authored, elucidates, a concerning, what I would say, beyond a crisis, but more or less an epidemic, is, food insecurity, that is, troubling, our youngest generations. Particularly, we look at, Generation Zers, and we look at a large segment of Generation Zers being full-time undergraduate students. So, one of the driving forces behind aligning myself with F4 was to do whatever I could, if to eradicate, but more or less work to mitigate food insecurity among undergraduate populations. And, they're the ones that I serve as a faculty member. Whether I'm lecturing, whether I'm advising, whether I'm supporting, research or precepting, that there's an untold number, or, this contingent or pocket that is, disaffected, that are likely, coming to class each and every day. They're corresponding with me. They're in labs, they're in lectures, they're maybe completing internships, they could even be working, part-time, and many of them are doing so hungry. And, that has some immense, ramifications on academic performance, which in turn is going to impact, attrition risk. So, individuals that, are food insecure, the studies have shown that there is a significantly reduced chance of graduating. We look at undergraduates, so completing, their undergraduate degree. One study in particular had highlighted that this reduced likelihood was about 42%, among students, who are food insecure, students who are maybe, skipping meals, involuntarily or perhaps even voluntarily, and they're eating less due to some financial constraints because, they have bills to pay, or they're allocating maybe some money, towards some of their, scholastic expenses. So to me, this is something that is very, very important, and it's going to, impact the health and also the trajectory of one of our youngest generations. And, if we're having this generation, who is struggling right now, of course, we're all, struggling to an extent. All of us are impacted, by some of the turmoil abroad and some of the economic uncertainties, at home. But when you're younger and you're not yet established and you're facing crippling housing costs, and you're looking at paying a significant amount of money for food. I mean, for instance, like if someone were to eat a meal out, they're looking to pay $15 or more, if they're going to go to maybe a local, restaurant, or a deli, or even a fast food, establishment. Whereas 10 years ago, that same meal would have probably cost me about $5 or $6, outside. So, the students are really feeling this, as well as, more broadly, Generation Zers, because they aren't yet, established in comparison to millennials, and obviously to those that are, in older generations. So this is something that is, very passionate about, because so many people are affected, including the students that I'm probably working with every day.
Has this always been something that's been on your heart, food insecurity, or has it become more of at the forefront lately?
For me, it's really shifted to the forefront, but you know, I harken back to, when I was an undergraduate, and fortunately for me, I had family members that were, providing, um, a semblance of, financial support, if not covering, my tuition. There was always someone that I could rely on. There was always a safety net, and I was very blessed to have that. And that's really where I am today. But I think back, years ago, to some classmates that I never saw again. And why did I never see them again? Was it maybe their academic performance, or, was it maybe some, drivers or influences, that were external, that impacted, their academic performance, that led to them, dropping out.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that, that if we're able to provide, the basics, and we look at, Maslow's, hierarchy of basic needs. I mean, if we're able to provide minimally, you know, food, as well as, shelter, and of course that's implying, clothing too, to people that are trying to better themselves, particularly undergraduate students, we're going to be able to empower them, and they are not going to be, a liability down the line due to reduced educational attainment or reduced, skill acquisition. So I think that, it is incumbent upon us, as a society, to help out those in need who are trying to help themselves. View it as an investment and not as a cost. And my aim is to raise, more awareness, and hopefully raise, some resources or some money, that can be, diverted or redistributed to those that are in the greatest need.
I love what you said. View it as an investment, not a cost. That's great. Beautiful outlook, Joe. Well, are there any other items that you'd like to touch on before we wrap up for today?
For sure. So, let's talk about, some of the ways that, um, that academic, performance is going to be impacted, especially if you are, a hungry student. First and foremost, and this harkens back to, if you've taken any, courses in physiology, maybe you've taken some course in neuroscience, but, the brain utilizes a substantial amount of our body's energy, approximately 20 to 25%
Wow.
of our body's glucose. that glucose is going to be, converted into, a readily usable form, or ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, through a process known as glycolysis. And of course, we have the Krebs cycle, the electron transport, chain that's also involved, particularly in oxidative phosphorylation, where we're looking at a yield of anywhere from 30 to 32 ATP, um, you know, per 1 unit of, glucose. So in order to thrive in the classroom, and in order for our brain, to receive, a sufficient amount of fuel, we need to make sure that, none of our students, are hungry. All of our students, have, a sufficient amount of, nutrients at their disposal. It's understandable. You sleep in, you might not be able to, gather the amount of time to prepare breakfast or even consume something on the way out the door. That happens. All right. College students are just figuring everything out as it relates to time management. But what about the students that, have missed maybe the past 2 or 3 meals? And, we look at, having lower, blood glucose, keeping in mind that the brain, or really we look at 100 grams of brain tissue, utilize anywhere from 4 to 6, milligrams of glucose per minute, which is approximately the maximal glucose oxidation rate of the body, which is typically going to be achieved during intense exercise. So, you never would, leave the house and embark on, a long run, or maybe go to the gym and engage in resistance training, in a fasted state. So why would you, go to the classroom, in that way? But unfortunately for many students, they don't have an opportunity, otherwise.
Wow.
And what the data has shown us, and this goes back to 2022, the US Government Accountability Office revealed that 3.8 million students were, grappling with food insecurity. Now,
Wow.
not students, across, I guess the lifespan, if we will, or, we're looking at students in their formative years. We're talking about, undergraduate students, which it's really implausible to me, because billions of dollars each year, and it's approximately $40 billion per fiscal year, is doled out via Pell Grants. But yet these same students, or an overlap of these students, are dealing with food insecurity. And that's going to lend itself to reduced academic performance, reduced task performance as it relates to maybe an exam, or as it relates to an assignment. And the poorer you do academically, the greater risk you are of, dropping out. Okay. Um, and like, we're not necessarily throwing this money away, but we're not capturing all of the needs, of students. And we look at where food insecurity is going to hit students the hardest, or the hardest hit students are those that are minorities, those that are females, those that are at 2 year institutions, where they might be there due to academics, but in many cases they're there, due to economics, just because tuition is significantly lower at a 2 year institution. We look at these students that, that they might not qualify for SNAP, or supplemental nutrition assistance program. In fact, the report by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, which revealed that 3.8 million students uh, are, dealing with food insecurity, showed that 59% of undergraduate students do not qualify for SNAP benefits,
Hmm.
because you need to work, and you also need to be a single parent. Now, granted, there are cohorts of undergraduate
Right.
students that meet one, or, both of those, criteria points. Um, However, we still have a number of students that, are struggling, and whether it's to, maybe get their next meal, um, they're just struggling, and it's really challenging to navigate those years, whether you have food or not.
Right.
And then we look at, some of the tolls physically, emotionally. We talked about, the academic costs. We also, look at, some of the social tolls in addition to that too. So we're not adept at identifying the students who are going to be, in the greatest need. A
Mhm.
lot of students, might be hesitant to, confide in others and, reveal that, hey, I'm struggling to eat. I can't eat. And in my 15 plus years as an educator or someone working within a higher education, I probably only had a handful of students reveal to me that, they were hungry or they couldn't afford to eat. And I've interfaced with and have supported and have taught, countless students over the years. Um, so I find that, the awareness, isn't there. I think that there's even some stigmas that are associated with that too. And then, of course, accessing, some resources on campuses, they may need to establish, a need, which will serve as another hurdle. I don't think that we have, college students out there that are just trying to get a free meal for the sake of getting a free meal. Um, I think that we should provide, undergraduate students, um, you know, equitable opportunities for them to be able to secure, food and, be able to, get sufficient nutrition and nourish themselves.
Yeah, good point, Joe. There's a lot there. There's a lot of components and a lot of moving parts, but I think you're doing a really good job at least bringing awareness to an important issue, probably one that's not talked about enough. The numbers are staggering. How many people, you said 3.8 million basically college kids are food insecure at any one point in time.
Yes.
Pretty staggering, if you think about it, and the ability to not get access to food while you're also trying to pass a class. Maybe you are working a few hours a week too. That's overwhelming, especially for anyone, let alone starting out in your life.
Yeah. And really, F4 does some really great work. And I could definitely envision, F4, getting entrenched with higher education institutions, with colleges and universities, and helping connect the dots and helping connect deserving undergraduate students, to resources.
I think that's key is connections and also creating that awareness, and that's the role we're trying to play. Your article was very informative, and it sounds like your experience was very moving.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm in a good position where, I can help drive this, and I look forward to working collaboratively with you and board members, and of course those that are, supporting this great organization, and community partners, as well as, the institutions that I serve or I have served or I've attended. Just because I want to see, some things being done, and hopefully, if we're able to move the needle, even if it's, one student at a time, it's still, in the right direction, because there's nothing that, you and I or the organizations could be able to do alone, that's going to be able to make a statistically significant impact. But it's something that we certainly can do, to create some momentum and raising some awareness and also increasing some advocacy, particularly of this underserved population.
Like you said, it's viewing it as an investment and not a cost.
Yes, for sure.
So
And we need to look at it. It could be a governmental organization, it could be an institution, and yes, this might be somewhat extreme, but it's just like, okay, well, if I'm an educational institution, college, university, I'm thinking to myself, well, a typical meal plan for the semester may run about $500 to $700. Why don't we just bake that into the tuition? Because It's going to, capture all of the commuter students. If you're a commuter student, you're also going to be at a greater risk of being food insecure, versus maybe a student that is living on campus who likely might be on a meal plan at that point. Because again, we have to view it as an investment because what happens if, we have students that, drop out, and not to say there aren't any options for, folks that, don't finish college, but you're still limiting their number of options. Um, and hopefully it's not going to, be due to not getting enough food or not having a sufficient meal or just having that constant worry of how are you going to put food on the table for yourself or for your family, and that's going to detract from a student being able to perform, a student being fully engaged or immersed within their work.
I love that. Well, I think a good place to end this is focusing on stepping outside of ourselves, getting back to that idea, service, service, service. It's an investment, not a cost. And now we have more awareness around these underserved populations, these college students that are maybe exposed to food insecurity that maybe there's not as much awareness around. We're hopefully creating some awareness for that now.
For sure. And you and I are also, looking for, partners, within the community, those that can, support our great mission, those that can work, closely with us.
Yep.
And we are going to be, entering, the higher education, sector, so that way we can, impact, this underserved population for sure.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you being with us today, Joe. Thank you for your time, your energy, your heart of service, your heart of love. You're a good, good human being, and I'm blessed to call you a friend.
Likewise, my friend. Thanks so much, Derek. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. I am signing off. Derek Fiorenza with Joseph Giandinato on the F4 Hunger Awareness Show. Please make sure to subscribe, follow, like us on anywhere you listen to us, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and follow us on social media. We appreciate your support. Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you, Derek.